Welcome to Train Signal. You are watching the lab setup video for Lab 16, Active Directory, Sites and Replication. In this video, I will go over the hardware requirements, show you how to configure the equipment, and then finally set up the lab. So let's first start with the hardware requirements. Here's a table that I've drawn up. There are 3 columns in this table. The first column lists the hardware components that you need. The second column lists the minimum hardware requirements, and the third column lists the recommended hardware requirements. So to begin with, you need 4 computers. Each of these computers must be Pentium 1, 133 megahertz or better. If you have 300 megahertz computers, so much the better. As far as RAM goes, you require a minimum of 256 megabytes of RAM. If you have 512 megabytes, so much the better. Hard disk, about 4 gigabytes is fine. 10 gigabytes or larger is what I recommend. Now, as far as NIC card goes, on 3 of these computers, you need 1 NIC card. But on the 4th computer, you need 2 NIC cards. The reason for that is that the 4th computer we will configure as a router. And I'll show you exactly how to do that. So once again, this particular requirement is different from the other labs. On the 3 computers that we're going to call server, you need 3 NIC cards. And on the 4th computer, you'll require 2 NIC cards. Now, as far as connectivity devices is concerned, a minimum of 1 switch or hub would do. If you have 2 switches, so much the better. So that way I can segregate the 2 networks that we're going to set up, and it will be very clear in your mind exactly which is network 1 and which is network 2. And as far as the network cables goes, you require a minimum of 5 category 5 cables, 1 for each computer, and the router will require 2. So in other words, you will require 3 for one of each servers, and on the router you require 2 cables. Now, if you are following the recommended requirements, you will need 2 switches, and you will connect the 2 switches by means of a crossover cable. So let me show you a network diagram for this. Here's how a network will look like. Let me maximize the screen for you. Here we go. In this particular diagram, I've showed you 2 switches. So here's my first switch on which I will set up the first network. In this particular video for the labs, we will be setting up 2 different networks, network 1 and network 2. So the first switch will have the servers that belong to network 1 connected to them. And these servers will be DC1 and DC2. On the second switch, you will have the server for network 2 connected, which is DC3 over here. And then here's a router. The router will have 1 NIC card connected to switch 1 and the other NIC card connected to switch 2. And you will connect the 2 switches together by means of a crossover cable. Okay? So let's look at our computer configuration, and we'll come back to this diagram one more time. So let me take you back to my notes over here, and we will go on to the next table over here for the computer configuration. The first computer, we will call it DC1, and we will configure the IP address of 200.200.201.1, and the subnet mask will be /24, which is nothing but 255.255.255.0. On this computer, we will install Windows 2000 Server as the operating system. So just have the default installation of Windows 2000 Server on this, and I have also installed Service Pack 4, and I highly recommend that you install Service Pack 4 on all the servers that we're going to set up. So the first computer once again is DC1, and the IP address is 200.200.201.1. The second server will be DC2. On this one again, I'll install Windows 2000 Server as the operating system, and then the IP address will be 200.200.201.2. So in other words, DC1 and DC2 will share the same network ID, which is 200.200.201.0. This will be the first computer of that network, and DC2 will be the second computer of that network. DC3, which will be our third computer, will be set up on the other network, or network 2. On this computer, we will configure the IP address of 200.200.202.0. So this will be our domain controller in the second network, whose network ID is 200.200.202.0. And again, the subnet mask will be 255.255.255.0. So once again, 3 servers at this point, DC1 and DC2 belong to the same network, whose network ID is 200.200.201.0. From now on, I'll call that the 201.0 network, and the 202.0 network will be our second network, on which DC3 will be the lone server over there, whose IP address will be 200.200.202.1 with a subnet mask of /24. All these 3 servers will have Windows Server 2000 installed on them with Service Pack 4. Now, the fourth computer, we will also install Server 2000. Remember, this is a computer that has 2 NIC cards. the first NIC card, we will configure it as 200.200.201.254. In other words, this NIC card will be connected to the first switch or to the first network on which DC1 and DC2 are also connected. The second NIC card, we will give it an IP address of 200.200.202.254, and it will be connected to the second switch, or this will be the router for the second network. And again, the subnet mask will be /24. Let me take you to the diagram one more time, see if this is clear. Here's our DC1 and here's our DC2. Okay, let me maximize the screen for you. Here, this is much better. Here's DC1, here's DC2. DC1 and DC2 belong to the same network, hence they are also connected to the same switch, namely switch 1. Okay, and their IPs are 200.200.201.1 and 201.2. In fact, this network then becomes the 201.0 network. DC3 belongs to the second network, hence you will see that there is a cable going from this one to the second switch. Okay, and this particular server has an IP address of 200.200.202.1. In other words, it belongs to the 202.0 network, and it is connected to the second switch. The router has two NIC cards. One NIC card is connected to the first switch. This particular NIC card will have the IP address for network 1, which is 200.200.201.254. I selected the last IP address to designate that for the router. And the second NIC card is connected to the second switch, and this particular NIC card that is connected to switch 2 will have an IP address of 200.200.202.254. In other words, the second NIC card will be housed in the second network or switch 2. So this particular one is connected to both switches. These two are connected to switch 1. DC3 is connected to switch 2. And then switch 1 and switch 2 are connected to each other by means of a crossover cable. Once this connectivity is done, then you should be able to go to DC1 and DC2 and be able to ping each other. And from DC1 and DC2, you should be able to ping the router. The default gateway of these servers will be 201.254, so you should be able to ping that particular interface. And then DC3, you should be able to ping from DC3 to 202.254. Okay, so let's check this out. In order to do this, what I'm going to do is introduce you to my recording studio or my recording workstation, and here's what this particular computer looks like. You will be able to easily recognize that I'm on the recording studio by looking at the train signal logo over here. Now, in order for me to show you all the activities that I perform on each of these servers, what I've done is install terminal services on the Windows 2000 server installation of each of these three, or rather each of the four computers, the three domain controllers and the router. And I've set up remote desktop on my XP workstation over here, so that I can access each of these servers by means of remote desktop. Once again, on each of these four servers, I'm running terminal services. And now I'm going to access each of these servers so that the screens of each of these computers come up on my screen. So here we go. Let's start with DC1. So I'm going to connect to DC1. And every time I perform an activity on DC1, I'll tell you very clearly that I'm going to make a connection to DC1. Our default administrator's username will be administrator, and the password will be password, all lower cases. And here's my connection to DC1. It is very important that you know exactly which computer I'm connected to, so that you have a very good idea of what activity to perform on which computer. So at this point, and you'll be able to see this very clearly on my screen, I'm on DC1, whose IP address is 200.200.201.1. And let me show you the configuration of DC1. What I've also done is renamed the computer account, the computer object over here, renamed it from my computer to DC1, so that you can clearly see that I'm on DC1 by looking at the title bar over here and on the computer object over here, and you can see the IP address over here as well. Okay, let me show you the configuration of DC1. I'm going to right click on network places, go to properties, and then go to the TCP/IP properties of this computer, and then show you the TCP/IP configuration. So at this point, I have set up the IP address of this particular server as 201.1. Subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. I have not set up the default gateway yet. We will set it up once we configure the router. And then for the DNS server, even though DNS is not yet installed on this particular computer, DC1 will become the DNS server of the entire domain. So I have already set up 200.200.201.1 as the IP address of the DNS server for this particular computer. So that was the TCP/IP configuration. And now let's make a connection to DC2. And as you can see, this screen is this particular screen for DC1 is blue. I'm going to minimize this connection. And now in this manner, let's connect to DC2. So I'm going to double click on this object for remote desktop connection. And once again, I'm going to log in as administrator to DC2. So here's the password, and I will be connected. What I've done also is that change the background colors of these computers or these servers to different colors so that you can easily tell which particular server I am on. So at this point, I'm on server DC2, whose IP address is 201.2. And again, here I've renamed my computer object to DC2 as well. Let's check out the TCP IP configuration of this computer. I'm going to go to the TCP IP properties one more time. And there we go. The IP address is 200.200.201.2, the default subnet mask. And once again, my DNS server is DC1, which is 200.200.201.1. So that was our second server, namely DC2. Let's check if we have connectivity in our network. So I'm going to go to the command prompt of DC2. Okay, and I'm going to just prepare my screen over here, and let's check it out. From DC2, I'm going to ping the first domain controller, which is not yet configured as domain controller, 201.1. And I have connectivity. So DC1 and DC2 can connect to each other. Let me also ping the router. The router's interface is 201.254. And here we go. I have good connectivity between DC2 and the router. It is a good idea to check this connectivity before you go on to upgrade these computers to domain controllers, just to make sure that your network is working okay. So let's minimize this screen as well. And now let's connect to DC3, which is going to be our domain controller in the second network. So once again, I'm going to log in as the administrator. And as you can see from the screen, one more time, it is DC3, which is housed in the second network, which is the 202.0 network. Hence, the IP address of DC3 is 200.200.202.1. And again, I've changed the color of the screen and renamed the computer object. Let's check out the TCP IP properties. And there we go. 202.1. I've not set up the DNS server. Let's do that right now. It's going to be 200, 200, and 201.1. In other words, I will be having just one DNS server, which is also going to be DC1. So here we go. The objects are set at this point. Now, in the second network, I'm going to go to the command prompt one more time. And here, let's look at it one more time. Maximize the screen over here. This is DC3. DC3 should be able to ping the router on the 202.254 interface. So let's verify that. And I'm going to go back to my DC3 over here. Prepare the screen one more time, and let's try to ping 200.200.202.254, and I have connectivity. Okay, now just to verify this, let's try to do something else. Let me try to ping DC1, which is 201.1. And here we go, the connection failed. What I'm trying to show you is that even though in this diagram I've shown you this as a router, I've not yet configured this as a router. Okay, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in the next video. All I want you to do is install the operating systems as default installations for Windows 2000 Server on all these 4 computers, and then rename them as DC1, DC2, router, and DC3. Change their IP addresses to according to the chart that I've shown you, and then eventually we'll configure them as a router. Okay, so don't worry about connectivity at this point between the routers and the other networks. I will show you exactly how to accomplish that. So let's get out of this one more time and go back to our desktop connection for DC3. So once again, that was good. I'm going to close the screen and let's get out of that. So here we go. That was DC3, and I have connectivity between all the three. Between the appropriate domain controllers and their interfaces. So let's now go to the router. I've again called it router. The computer name is also router. I'm going to log in as the administrator. And once again, I've changed the background color to gray over here. And here we go. The computer object is called router. And now I've accessed this router on the 201.254 interface. You could easily access this on the 202.254 interface as well. Okay, but when I set up my remote desktop, I just happened to use this interface to connect to it. Now, let's check out the network properties of this. And this is important. What I've done is the following. And I will show you this later on, why we have done in this manner. What we're going to eventually do is set up 2 different networks. One network we'll call it California, and the other one we'll call North Carolina. So to the first network, California, what I've done is I've renamed the computer, the connection object over here to CA. So you should do the same thing. And this CA object, if I were to go to the properties of this particular one, you will see that this is housed in the first network. Hence the IP address that I'm using for this particular interface is 200.201.254. And again, the DNS server is 201.1. In other words, this particular interface is connected to switch 1. Let me take you back over here. So what I showed you was the 201.254 interface that is connected to switch 1, and what I've done is, for convenience, so that we can easily recognize which interface belongs to which network, I have called it the California interface. Now this second one, called the North Carolina interface, what I've done is I've given it the IP address of 202.254. Once again, the DNS server is 201.1. So this way I can easily recognize which interface is connected to which switch, so that I can start troubleshooting it. Alrighty, so that's our router, and that finishes the configuration of the 4 computers that I showed you: DC1, DC2, DC3, and then the router. So going back to our diagram over here, let's summarize this. We maximize the screen over here. You will have 4 servers. You will install Windows 2000 Server on each of these servers, install Service Pack 4, and then configure the server as such. Go to the first server and change the computer name to DC1, and change the IP address to 200.201.1. In this manner, this will be DC2, 201.2. Router will have 2 interfaces. 201.254 will be connected to the first switch. 202.254 will be connected to the second switch. What I also recommend is that you rename the interface for 201.254 as California, or CA for short, and 202.254 as NC, or North Carolina for short. And then the 4th computer over here, which is DC3, will have the IP address of 202.1, and this will be connected to the second switch. The 2 switches will be connected to each other by means of a crossover cable. So that should accomplish our configuration for this particular video. So what I've shown you in this video is the minimum hardware requirements for the equipment that you need, and then I showed you how to configure the computer equipment, and last but not the least, I showed you in a diagram how to network the 4 computers together so that you can have a working network. Also, please remember to ping the computers in the same network and the default gateway, so that you have no connectivity issues. I thank you very much for watching this video, and I welcome you once again to TrainSignal, and hope to share a lot of knowledge with you in this video series.